cash, then keys. I'm leaving, please believe in me and the rest of my heathen. Checking Cadillac in the top of the Four Seasons. Penthouse rooftop birds I'm feeding. Daughter sleeping, nothing up my sleeve. Don't tease it. I need you to get up on the dance floor. Get out that body asking for. Cause I feel like busting loose and I feel like touching you. Can't nobody stop the juice. So baby, tell me what's the use. I say
it's getting hot in here,
so hot.
So take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my clothes off.
It's getting hot in here,
so hot.
So take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my away with the bar if you ain't popping the bottles. Good is on the fame if you ain't up in the model. I see you driving and hitting the throttle, and I'll be down to do 100 top down. We gotta get out the freeway, exit 106 and parked it. Ashtray, flip it, time to spark it. Gucci collar, get dollar, got up and rocked it. I take game it, cause baby I can't talk this bomb. Sweat, hot up in this joint. Phone count, tank top, all of this part. You really wanna, so baby you can lose. You got secrets, gonna leave Cancun. So take it off while you're home alone. You're not dancing from the mirror while you're all alone. Checking your impression and telling our best friend lie. I'll bring my fucking beat.
It's getting hot in here,
So hot,
so take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my clothes off now.
It's getting hot in here,
So hot,
so take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my clothes off.
It's getting hot in here,
So hot,
so take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my clothes off.
It's getting
Hot in here,
so take off all your clothes.
I am getting so hot, I wanna take my it's a little better, up with a little better, and then it just fall out. I like it when you up with a little better, and then it just fall out. I like it when you up with a little bit, and then it just fall out. I like it when you up with the baby when you with my homies, tryna get a little VI, keep it down on the low key. If you know how it feels, I seen a shorty, he was checking up on me. Got my thing, he was spitting in my ear. You would think that he knows me. I decided to chill. Conversation got heavy. He had me feeling like he's ready to blow. Okay, no. Someone say to come get me. So I got up and followed him to the floor. He said, baby, let's go. When I told him, I said, yeah. Shawty got down, so you come and get me. I got so caught up, I forgot you told me.
to say they unafraid of you.
Bashir's first plane was turned back to Iran after being directed to change course. As a result, his meeting with Chinese President Hu Jintao was pushed back. Bashir is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. China and Sudan have deep trade and investment ties. Sudan is China's third biggest African trading partner behind Angola and South Africa. Total imports and exports stood at nearly $6.4 billion in 2009. Oil is a major part of that relationship. China is the largest buyer of Sudanese oil. Sudan is sub-Saharan Africa's third largest oil producer, with more than 80% of known reserves in the south. More than 10,000 Chinese people work in Sudan. They're heavily involved in infrastructure projects. Rights groups say Sudan is a major recipient of Chinese arms and ammunition, despite a UN embargo on weapons transfers to the Darfur region. But China has defended its arms trade policies, saying they're prudent and responsible. Frank Siren is the author of a book on China. He's also an expert on African-Chinese relations. He joins us now live from Beijing. Why are the Chinese receiving Omar al-Bashir now? We did speak about all these vested interests, but why now?
But I think, first of all, they are interested to secure their investments, and they have the impression that they can talk to al-Bashir and probably convince him to behave in a way that in northern and south Sudan will be more stability than it is now.
But if they have all these interests in Sudan, why did the Chinese then not block that Security Council resolution which referred the situation in Sudan to the ICC and which led to the arrest warrant issued for Omar al-Bashir, the first sitting head of state, the second now being the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi?
I think they trust more themselves than the international institutions. So they think if they speak directly to al-Bashir, they can receive better results than if they give it away to the United Nations.
But legally, aren't they now bound by this resolution, which they did not vote against? We just heard from Ocampo, the chief prosecutor of the ICC, saying a country doesn't have to be a party to the ICC. And China isn't, Russia isn't, the US isn't, but as a permanent member of the Security Council, surely it must be bound by a Security Council resolution.
Yes, I'm hesitating a bit if it's more important to talk or more important to follow the interest of the international community. And I think probably in these circumstances it's the better idea to talk to al-Bashir and to make probably sure that he will follow the procedures than to not to receive him. And you could also see the reactions of the Americans.
Doesn't it show some kind of double standard, not just on the part of the Chinese, but the Russians and the US? They're not parties to the ICC, yet they refer all these other countries to the International Criminal Court, knowing full well that the indictment of a sitting head of state would make a political solution even harder.
Yes, that's right. But even the Americans were reacting quite calm on this invitation from the Chinese side, because they know that al-Bashir trusts the Chinese, and they hope that they can somehow solve one or the other problems. I'm not really sure if this is going to working, but I think still we should give it a try, and we should wait for the results, and probably al-Bashir will leave Beijing having understood one or the other fact better than before.
Frank Siren, author of the China Code, joining us from Beijing. Thanks very much.
Well, welcome everyone, and happy Friday. I obviously played a video because we're going to talk about Sudan because nobody else wants to talk about Sudan. So we're going to have a conversation of why it's so important. Now, I know many of you have seen over the years, I've talked about certain topics. So before I start my show, I wanted to address something. And it totally came in conversation. And I can't believe, I'm supposed to be smart. I'm actually a genius. And I didn't see it. I now know why my books are an issue. I actually said it publicly that in those books, you have a code that when the cipher key is released, you will all be able to, just cooperating with two other people, access files from whatever McAfee had. That includes the Epstein files. So now it makes sense. And this is why I'm going to insure it, so at least I can not lose money again. So I just wanted to say it, right? Just to... I thought I was smart. Obviously not that smart, because it just like dawned on me. I was like, why do they keep targeting my stuff? Like, it doesn't make sense. Now it makes sense. So that's the codes that you guys get in these books. So, and they're very hard to calculate. So now I have to go through and see, just rehash out the codes because the codes are allocated to the customer, right? And so everyone's getting a duplicate, and they're probably going to end up getting that. So maybe this is why. And it's fascinating because an enigma is not easy. So on that note, I discovered that. That's fantastic. So now let's move on to things that actually we need to know to be able to understand the dynamics that are happening. And rather than talk, you know what? Let me say something on this. This deserves cigarette. Like, I had a few comments from people, and obviously my bestie too. And it was like, we're watching other commentators online and, that are pundits or even reporters. And they have no idea what's going on. And I am so sad for the people of this whole world that are watching commentary come out of these freaking CAA central casting people that actually have zero perception of what's going on. And I actually feel sad. Like, I could call them out, but I'll just tell you everybody in just a handful of no. And that came because I was kind of like talking about how I'm still struggling with my ego. Like, I already know that very important people take what I have to say very seriously. And obviously, even though I serve our leaderships in a capacity, the leadership that I look out to are the people of the United States. So I struggle with my ego when I see other people getting prizes and bonuses and advancements, on the work that I've done. So I get a little bit bitchy about it. But on the other hand, I feel like, why are they sucking a lollipop? Why can't I suck a lollipop under a spotlight? I really don't want the spotlight, and it sounds really bad to say it out loud, but I do struggle with it, and it's normal. And so when I see that someone like today was actually accoladed for something that was actually my work, for the eyes of the world, and they're not worthy, and when they shovel shit down people's throat, I get very upset. So I had to just, So that is, I just need to focus on the people and my service, and I'm going to zen. And I am running late like crazy today because we're supposed to be leaving soon because it's my birthday weekend. And I'm like, I haven't even packed certain things. Like I'm in heatless curls live. Why not? Like, why not? You can't tell. You think it's a hairstyle, but it's heatless curls. So, so I'm gonna be ready to go. So where do we start? I think we should start with me giving you a little bit of insight. Now, I dropped 3 articles today because I drafted a policy document that I'm not making public, obviously. But based on that, I thought it would be the right thing to do to explain to the public everything in that article. Now, even though I have been extremely, my target level, the way I put it out in the articles is easily digestible. Policy document is too, but you have to have like knowledge of the region. So let's get that knowledge of the region because I want people to understand what all these distractions are. And in order to do that, I can tell you, but first I just want to show you what the world is telling the rest of the world. So we're going to start with this one podcaster. He has a podcast channel on YouTube. I brain farted. Called War Fronts. Now, a lot of the time, and I'm going to say this, no shade, the things he says are extremely wrong. Not because it's intentional. I believe it's because he's working off of public knowledge. Okay. But this one is an exceptional piece on understanding the dynamics. So I'm going to lay it out to you kind of really simple before we delve in. The video you just saw was from 14 years ago. It was indicating the deep-seated ties that now exist and have existed between the nation of Sudan and South Sudan. At the time, it was only Sudan, right? Actually, it was South Sudan at the time too. Well, 10, 16. Yeah, it was South Sudan because in 2011 is where they broke off. But it shows how closely connected they are with Iran, Russia, and China. And I thought, because I've been seeing, we have a lot of money that we give out to help bring stability and curb hunger and aid people of the world as a superpower and a nation that, asserts itself on the world stage. We are expected to, help because we can, right? You help when you can. And so, how do I articulate this? So we spend over $200 billion. Our budget is insane, helping the world a year. And then you wonder why we're in a deficit. And a lot of that aid isn't done appropriately or accurately for a very long time. And so I think that because, UN ambassadorship positions, not just UN, all these positions are usually like kind of more diplomatic, more like a favor, like you've served your country in this capacity, now take this role, where you're just kind of like the spokesperson, right? And usually someone with some entitlement or some ability of you should do this because you did good there, like kind of like a cookie. You get like a really easy seat where you just go to galas and stuff and you're the relay. Are these ambassadorships. One is the World Food Program one. And now usually that's kind of like typical for the other ones. I mean, it was given to Cindy McCain, and no offense, she's just John McCain's wife. Okay. And she was given this title. So I think we should start looking at these positions more strategically and looking at these programs that we have more strategically. Specifically the World Food Program, as you know, we help, provide food to places that don't have any, but more so we also try to create the infrastructure for such things. I mean, it's never really implemented accurately, let's be fair. I mean, the shit in Gaza, like that's embarrassing. So, and obviously I always take the opportunity to throw Molly Fee and Newland under the bus anytime I can, because I feel like they just thrive on destruction. And I kind of blame Molly's policy implementation and activities in Sudan for the mess that they're in now with a full-blown civil war. Okay. Now, a lot of you don't know who Malifi is because obviously your cast of characters that have been cast to mesmerize you with bullshit don't know her either because they obviously don't know the space and domain that they talk of. So let's start at the beginning. How important is Sudan? Well, it is very important. UAE, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China, all over that shit. Like, all over it. Now, President Trump obviously has started making moves and spoke with MBS and said, yo, we got to end this war. And so with this position that recently was vacated with Cindy McCain, I was like, this is the opportune time. But for you to understand just how dramatic the whole scenario is, we got to watch this video. So let's go ahead and do that. And please enjoy the show.
About 3 weeks since the Sudanese city of Al Fasher fell and one of the largest massacres in human history began. About a week after the city fell, Nathaniel Raymond, executive director of Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab, said the words that will perhaps come to define this conflict more than any other. Quote, more people could have died in the past week in Al Fasher, and this is without hyperbole, than died in the past 2 years in Gaza. If that claim is accurate, then the numbers are staggering. The Palestinian Health Authority estimated that by October 2025, more than 67,000 people had died, which the UN Human Rights Office believes is probably an undercount. So, in 1 week, in one city, more than 67,000 people have died. The death toll is undoubtedly far higher by now. In the words of Dr. Mohammed Osman Akasha, Sudan's Shah's affair in Kenya, this is not a conflict, it is for extermination. Now, if you've been following our coverage of Sudan, you're probably already familiar with some of this, but it's important that we take the time to say it again for 2 reasons. 1, this is an ongoing crisis that has no end in sight, and 2, while the world has, for all intents and purposes, looked away from this conflict, there are countries that have invested heavily in propping up the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, the group perpetrating the genocide in Al Fasher and the wider Darfur region. According to the Sudanese government, no country has done more to support the RSF than the United Arab Emirates. Sudan has accused the UAE of supplying the RSF with weapons, financing their operations, and even sending mercenaries to fight alongside the paramilitary group. The UAE, for its part, has consistently denied those allegations. Emirati government officials maintain that their nation has not taken sides in the conflict and has instead focused on humanitarian efforts and diplomatic mediation. Since both sides have their own competing narratives, we have to ask, well, what's the evidence that the UAE is funding the RSF? Why would the UAE be funding the RSF? And perhaps most importantly, is the UAE the critical pressure point that could bring peace to Sudan? Evidence. Okay, let's tackle our first question. Is there evidence that the UAE is backing the RSF? And the short answer to that is yes. The evidence is actually overwhelming, and it comes from a wide range of sources from Sudan as well as across the globe. First of all, there's the press. On the 10th of August 2023, barely 4 months since the war had first started, the Wall Street Journal published a bombshell exclusive. A cargo plane from the UAE that was ostensibly carrying aid for the Sudanese people had landed in Uganda, where, instead of finding the expected cargo, local officials found weapons. According to the Ugandan officials, the plane was allowed to continue its trip to eastern Chad, and they received orders from their superiors to stop inspecting flights stopping over from the UAE. A month later, the New York Times published a piece alleging that the UAE were running an elaborate covert operation to support the RSF. According to that report, the UAE was supplying the RSF with powerful weapons and drones, treating injured fighters, and airlifting the most serious cases to one of its military hospitals. The Times further claimed that the operation was based in a remote town across the border in Chad with a hospital and an airfield. Satellite imagery and conversations with officials from various countries, including the United States, revealed that cargo planes from the Emirates had been landing at the airfield on a near daily basis since June. Now, we chose to highlight these stories for two reasons. One, while other outlets had explored the relationship between the UAE and the RSF, these are some of the earliest examples we could find of the mainstream press directly accusing the UAE of arming the RSF. And two, they revealed something that would come to be a hallmark of the UAE's Sudan strategy: the use of other countries as intermediaries and transshipment points to maintain plausible deniability. After these two articles, the floodgates opened, and other outlets such as Kenya's Daily Nation, the UK-based Middle East Eye, and the international investigative outlet Bellingcat all published detailed investigations corroborating and expanding on these initial findings. Now, we can't discuss every single piece because then this video would be like 6 hours long, but we would like to focus on one more. In October, Middle East Eye published an article exploring the UAE's operations in the Somali port city of Bosaso. It alleges that for the past 2 years, the UAE has funneled hundreds of thousands of containers, some marked hazardous, through the port. It also claims that Colombian mercenaries recruited by the UAE to help the RSF have built a base in the city that includes a hospital where they treat those wounded in Sudan. Abdullahi, a senior maritime commander at Bosaso Airport, told the Eye, and we'll quote him here, "I recall one occasion when a plane carrying injured soldiers landed at Bosaso Airport and the aircraft door was visibly stained with blood." Away from the press, let's look at the evidence presented by the international community. In 2023, a UN panel of experts investigated the claims that the UAE was supporting the RSF. They spoke to sources in Chad and Darfur and concluded that the RSF was receiving weapons and ammunition several times per week from the UAE. The shipments would arrive in Amjaras Airport in Chad before being transported by road to RSF positions. More recently, Amnesty International has provided even more evidence of the UAE's involvement in the war. By analyzing pictures and videos showing the aftermath of RSF attacks, Amnesty researchers found that the paramilitary group was using Chinese GB-50A guided bombs and 155mm AH-4 howitzers. This is the first time the GB-50A bombs have been documented in active use in any conflict worldwide. The weapons are manufactured by Chinese state-owned defense corporation and sold to Saudi Arabia, which then provides them to the RSF. With all this evidence, it's pretty safe to say that the UAE is not only involved in the conflict, it is perhaps the greatest enabler of the massacre that's witnessed in Al Fasher. And that leads us to our second question: why is the UAE doing this? And we'll answer that. But first, a quick question for you. Do you enjoy what we do here at Warfronts? Do you want more episodes, that define this most episode of The Briefing Room Insights with our audience? When this question is asked, the answer that invariably comes up is natural resources, and with good reason. Sudan has vast deposits of coal, which have become increasingly important to the country's economy and the war itself. Following South Sudan's secession in 2011, Sudan lost about 75% of its oil reserves and 90% of its foreign exchange earnings. This economic crisis pushed the country to pivot toward gold mining, and by 2012, gold made up 60% of the country's exports. According to official estimates, gold currently makes up 70% of Sudan's exports, and production has surged from 41.8 metric tons in 2022 to 64 in 2024. Now, most of that gold is produced in areas that the RSF controls, and according to The Guardian, about 90% of it, worth more than $13 billion, was smuggled to the UAE. So it's understandable why most analysts point to gold when talking about the UAE's primary motivating factor. But it's not the only reason. According to May Darwich, a professor of international relations at the University of Birmingham, writing in the independent outlet The Conversation, a key reason why the UAE supports the RSF is because they consider the group's leader, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, alias Hemeti, the custodian of Emirati interests in the country. Talal Mohammed, an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, supports this view, writing that the UAE started viewing Hemeti in this light because RSF fighters played a significant role in the Yemeni civil war. We've already explored Abu Dhabi's first interest, gold. Their other is agriculture. Because water is scarce and little of its land is arable, the UAE imports more than 90% of its food, which isn't exactly ideal. Since the global food crisis in 2007, the UAE has made food security one of its highest priorities and has ramped up investing in farmlands abroad. According to research by Grain, an international non-profit organization working in the agricultural space, Emirati companies now control farmland in several countries, including Algeria, Brazil, Italy, and Spain. Sudan has long been a part of Abu Dhabi's agricultural strategy, with investments dating back to the 1970s when Sudanese President Jafar Nimeri promised that in return for Gulf investment, Sudan could become the breadbasket of the Arab world. Emirati investment in Sudan's agriculture accelerated after South Sudan's independence in 2011 left Khartoum scrambling for new revenue sources. Currently, two Emirati firms, International Holding Company, or IHC, the country's largest listed corporation with a very uncreative name, and Jinan Investment, are farming over 500 square kilometers in the north with plans to expand their farmland by more than 1,600 square kilometers. That's an area larger than the city of Abu Dhabi itself, by the way, which covers 972 square kilometers. Beyond agriculture, the UAE's other interest in Sudan is its 700-kilometer-long shoreline along the Red Sea. The Red Sea is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. About a third of global container traffic passes through it, connecting Asia to Europe via the Suez Canal. For the UAE, which is positioning itself as a global logistics and trade hub, controlling ports along this corridor means controlling the flow of goods and, by extension, wielding enormous economic and political influence. Critically, the Emirates aren't the only Middle Eastern power trying to use the Sudan war to gather influence in the Red Sea region, with Iran also looking to expand its proxy network into Sudan in the coming years. As Alex Doval, a leading expert on Sudan and the executive director of the World Peace Foundation, put it in an interview with Middle East Eye, quote, "The Sudanese Red Sea shores are the passkey of over 60% of international trade. By fueling instability in Sudan, the UAE has a chance to control these shores." Amgad Farid Altayeb, analyst and former senior aide to Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, agrees with the assessment, noting to Middle East Eye that this is not a new strategy for the Emirates, as it has pursued similar goals in Yemen, Djibouti, and Somalia, among other countries. There's also an ideological dimension that shouldn't be overlooked. The Sudanese armed forces have long-standing links to political Islam that dates back to the presidency of Omar al-Bashir. Those links proved crucial when Islamist forces helped the SAF retake Khartoum earlier this year. For the UAE, however, which has positioned itself as a bulwark against Islamist movements throughout the Middle East and North Africa, these connections meant that the SAF could not be trusted. By supporting the RSF, Abu Dhabi could potentially install a government that is opposed to political Islam. Finally, there's the simple fact that by supporting the RSF, the UAE gets an arena from which to project its power. In an article for Foreign Policy, Talal Mohammed makes the point that the increased competition between Saudi Arabia, which supports the SAF, and the UAE transformed the war into a proxy conflict as both vied to be the dominant power in the region. This regional rivalry reflects a broader shift in global power dynamics, where middle powers like the UAE are no longer content to operate in the shadow of traditional superpowers. Instead, they're carving out their own spheres of influence, and Sudan has become the latest battleground in this multipolar contest for dominance. Leverage. And finally, we come to our last question. Can the world use the fact that the UAE is funding the RSF to bring peace to Sudan? And the answer to this, as is often the case in geopolitics, is that it depends. And here's why. All Sudan observers agree that the only way to find a lasting peace is to bring the warring parties to the table and try and iron out a truce that both sides can stomach. At the moment, that doesn't seem likely. Although the conflict is functionally locked in a stalemate, with both sides entrenched in their respective strongholds, they both believe a military victory is possible. During a press conference, Dr. Kasha, Sudan's Shah d'Affaires in Nairobi, told the BBC that the SAF would agree to stop fighting only if the RSF were dismantled, surrendered its weapons, and its leader was held accountable. Quoting him here, "I have no information about a proposal for a truce. The only thing I know is the government of Sudan, the people of Sudan, are very determined to defeat this militia." It's difficult to imagine a situation where the RSF willingly gives up its arms, especially after their recent victory in al-Fasher, which functionally means Sudan will be locked in a war of attrition for the foreseeable future. So if neither side is willing to compromise, how do you get them to the table? Well, by cutting off their external support. Without weapons, money, and logistical backing they're getting from foreign actors, both the SAF and the RSF would be forced to negotiate. And here's why we said it depends. It's very easy for us to say that the foreign actors influencing the war should withdraw their support. After all, we're just a YouTube channel, and the biggest geopolitical dispute that we have to deal with is the occasional frivolous lawsuit from Somalia. The odds of foreign actors withdrawing their support, however, are pretty low. As we just demonstrated with the UAE, every country involved in this war has its own goals, and it would be exceedingly difficult to get them to abandon their strategic interests without either significant pressure from the diplomatic community or concessions to make up for what they would lose by withdrawing their support. According to Patrick Wintour, The Guardian's diplomatic editor, there is a chance that we might be witnessing the former. Because of the public outcry after the fall of Al Fasher and the subsequent massacre, Anwar Gargash, the UAE's senior diplomatic envoy, made a rare statement while in Bahrain, appearing to admit to mistakes in Abu Dhabi's Sudan strategy. Quoting him here, "We all made a mistake when the two generals who are fighting the civil war today overthrew the civilian government. That was, looking back, a critical mistake. We should have put our foot down collectively. We did not call it a coup." End quote. In Wintour's view, this is a striking reversal because of how much the UAE has invested to support the RSF. If Wintour is right, and the UAE is genuinely reconsidering its position, then there might be a path to peace. As Cameron Hudson, a former chief of staff to successive US presidential envoys for Sudan, told the Washington Post, quoting here, "The war would be over, if not for the UAE. The only thing that is keeping the RSF in this war is the overwhelming amount of military support that they're receiving from the UAE." End quote. And thank you for watching.
All right. So, like I said, I watched some of their stuff. I watch a lot of other commentators. One thing is to realize what is it that they want the people to think is happening and to actually find good content, like how I like to revisit Prometheus and him sometimes. Sometimes it's way off, but again, they're all working on public information and not being subject matter experts, right? So I think it's at this time that I'm just going to explain to you what the war is like, and I'm going to make it as simple as possible. I want you to, in your mind, picture Sudan like this. It's an enormous piece of land, bigger than all of Western Europe together. Okay, that's the size of it. Just think about it. And sitting right where the two branches of the Nile River actually meet. The soil is very fertile. There's more farmable land there than almost anywhere on Earth, just so that you understand the gravity of it. Oh, and not only that, there's gold underground. Oh, and there's oil. And there's water from the greatest river system in Africa. And the weather they have can grow food 365 days a year. So now imagine that for the last 100 years, nobody's been allowed to build anything that's useful there. No modern irrigation, no roads to get crops to the market, no factories to process food, just nothing. Just land sitting there waiting. That's Sudan. That's exactly what Sudan is. So why is there a war? All right. So as you heard from that video, there's like two men who control two armies. General Burhan, who runs the official Sudanese military, the SAF, and then General Hemedti, who runs the private military army called the RSF, the one that you just heard, the UAE funds. And I'll tell you why they fund it too. And just so you know, General Hemedti, he actually created that army over the years by controlling the gold mines that they have in Darfur. So in 2019, the Sudanese people, the regular people, students, doctors, under President Trump's administration, rose up and threw out the dictator, Omar al-Bashir, who you saw in the first video, making all these plans with China, which brought China to the African continent via the most precious part of Africa, right? And so they threw him out after 30 years of ruling them. Oh, which brings me back to Barack Hussein Obama's mom and dad, because at the same time when they installed the Khamenei, that was around the time that al-Bashir was also installed. Now, the people actually wanted democracy. They wanted like a civilian government. They were protesting in the streets in massive numbers. It was actually the first overthrow of a dictator that had the potential to actually give power back to the people. But here's what happened. These two generals stepped in and said, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't think so." So they took power for themselves. And instead of handing it to civilians, they agreed to share power temporarily. Now, Burhan ran the country officially. Hemedti ran his gold-funded private army alongside it. Now you're starting to understand what the UAE wants there, right? Now, then in 2023, thanks Molly Fee, they stopped sharing. Both when were like, no, I'm going to be in charge of all of this shit. And the other guy was like, I'm going to be in charge of all of it. Neither of them would back down. So on April 15, 2023, they started shooting at each other. In the middle of Khartoum, a city of 6 million people, there was a shootout. The Sudanese people didn't start this war. They didn't vote for it. They didn't want it. And these two generals, who both are stupid rich off Sudan's resources, decided they'd rather destroy the country than share it. So then you have to ask yourself, well, who's funding them, right? And as you saw, UAE, Hemedti's, RSF controls the gold mines. The UAE, tiny, but enormously wealthy country in the Middle East, buys that gold, no questions asked, and sends weapons back. And, oh, you want weapons? Here you go. Just give me your gold. And the UAE wants Sudanese farmland for its own food security. So it has a financial interest in keeping the Hemedti powerful and the war going, just so you understand. And then we have Russia. Like, it has the Wagner Group mercenaries who have mining concessions in Sudan. But Russia also wanted a naval base, which they just achieved a few months ago at the base, a port of Sudan on the Red Sea. So Russia is quietly supplying both sides while grabbing what it can. I make them right. And I have a video for that too. So let's focus a little bit on the Russia thing. Let's see the report about how Russia, right, actually got their port. Because that's they finalized their deal just a few months ago. There's a reason that I'm talking about it now. It's kind of like when I talked about Venezuela before and nobody was. And I was like, why is nobody talking about Venezuela? Because it's very important. Well, here you go. This is one of those times. So, as I said, we have Russia there. They got their port. So, here is a report about that.
Way for Russia's first naval base in Africa, a 25-year deal on the Red Sea in exchange for weapons. Now, this move, it comes as Sudan's military fights a brutal civil war against a paramilitary force inside the nation, RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. Sudan has offered Russia a long-term naval base on the Red Sea near Port Sudan, which is one of the world's busiest trade routes. According to Sudanese officials, the base would host up to 300 Russian personnel and dock 4 naval vessels, including nuclear-powered ships. In return, Sudan's military would receive air defense systems from Russia and other weapons at preferential prices. Officials say the weapons are urgently needed as fighting has intensified with RSF since April 2023, causing a humanitarian crisis in the country. This base that Russia will now get gives Moscow a major geopolitical win. The Red Sea carries 12% of global maritime trade. And only the US and China currently operate bases nearby. But now Russia will also be in the mix. The agreement, it revives a deal first signed in 2020, but it was paused after the fall of Sudan's longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, recently captured El Fasher, which is the last major city in Darfur, still held by the army. Western governments are alarmed. A Russian naval foothold on the Red Sea could strain Sudan's ties with the US and the European Union. And there is more on this from our correspondent Luisa Olani, who sent us this report from Lagos.
In a major geopolitical shift, Sudan's military government has offered Russia the opportunity to establish a naval base on the Red Sea coast as Africa's first base for Russia's navy. Under the proposed 25-year deal, Russia could deploy up to 300 personnel and berth as many as 4 warships, potentially including nuclear-powered vessels. In exchange, Sudan is expected to receive advanced Russian weaponry as the country grapples with a civil war that has devastated its armed forces. If implemented, the base would give Russia a strategic foothold on the Red Sea, a key maritime corridor linking the Suez Canal to the Indian Ocean and vital for global trade. But the move has raised alarm among Western powers who see Russia's presence in Africa as a challenge to regional stability and a potential threat to critical sea lanes. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, Beyond, all is one.
All right. So as you see, Russia got their way. So now what do we have? We have the UAE funding the gold mining money hungry general with weapons, and in exchange, they're pillaging their gold mines. We have Russia that wanted a base, and so they would fund both sides and still pillage either oil or gold or diamonds, because they have that too, right? Don't forget the fresh water, because there is a water shortage in this world. And they finally got their naval base, 25-year deal, right? So now Russia is always going to have a port there for 25 years, regardless of regime change. That is in effect, right? So, as you saw in the first video that I played for you, right, China's also got a presence. China has spent over 30 years building Sudan's oil pipelines and refineries. So they funded them. It didn't care who ran the country as long as the oil kept flowing. Now, the war has damaged most of what China built. Interesting, right? But China has every right to come back the moment there's a ceasefire, because it knows Sudan's resources better than anyone. And so here's the ugly truth. The war in Sudan is partly kept alive by outside powers who are profiting from the chaos. As long as the fighting continues, gold flows to Dubai, weapons flow back in, Russian and Chinese interests position themselves, and ordinary Sudanese people, well, they're starving. So now, what is it that Sudan and South Sudan actually have? Well, now here's the part that should make you really mad. Because the contrast between what Sudan has and what its people experience is like mind blowing. Sudan has more arable land than the entire European Union. It has the Nile, the most important river in Africa, running right through it. It has a climate that can grow wheat, cotton, soybeans, groundnuts, sesame, mangoes, and a dozen other crops. It has significant gold reserves, among the largest in Africa. It has oil, mostly in the south, but with pipelines running through the north. It has Arabic gum. Sudan produces the majority of the world's supply, which is used in everything from Coca-Cola to pharmaceuticals. And it has livestock, it has fish, it has an enormous untapped mineral deposit thing. Can we say niobium? Now, South Sudan specifically sits on most of the fertile land in all of Africa, fed by tributaries of the Nile, with enormous oil reserves that currently generate almost all the country's revenue. Now, together as a unified economic zone, even if not a unified country, Sudan and South Sudan could legitimately feed the majority of the African continent and export to the Middle East and beyond. Not someday in the distant future. With the right investment, it can happen within a generation. So you have to ask yourself, why do the people have nothing? Because every time resources have been discovered or developed, the people who controlled the guns took the money. The British colonial administration extracted what it wanted and left. After independence, northern Arab elites took power and sent money to Khartoum, while the periphery, Darfur and the Nuba Mountains, the south in general, they got fuck all. And when oil was discovered, the generals and their cronies took the revenue. When gold was discovered in Darfur, Hemedti's family built a private empire, while the people of Darfur were actually massacred. Now, this is the core of everything. Sudan is not poor because it lacks resources. It's actually one of the wealthiest nations pertaining to resources on the planet. It's poor because every generation of powerful men has stolen those resources while giving the people war instead of schools, roads, irrigation systems, tools, internet, power, right? Now, what I'm trying to put together to kind of bring to the table is that wars are very hard. And you could say, well, it's none of our business. Fuck Sudan, right? You could say that, and that's a fair statement, right? I don't care. Let's fix our country. But I've said this before. Our country stands because we are extremely, extremely, extremely wealthy as a nation, as a people, and the control we have. But, this country can actually feed the continent of Africa if we let it. So then the question everyone should be asking is, who decided Africa should stay hungry? I talked about this before in the past. I've asked the same question. Why is it called the Dark Continent? And don't go on to the racist side. It means, why haven't we given them power? Okay? And on the other thing, I want to make clear Africa is massive. We talked about maps before. Oh, and we're going to do a fun thing when I get back next week. OMG. When we talk geography, we're going to have a geography fun day. It's like fun with flags. It's going to be like fun with AI and geography. Just wait for it. But the Sudan is the prime example to show you why and who wanted to keep it dark. But before I go there, I want to show you a recap because it's getting hot. We have a lot of people talking about Sudan these past months. And no, it's not about the massacres and the murders because that's happening all the time. And you're going to be like, well, it should be talked about because there's people. Of course, but that's not what people want to talk about. Unless it's clickbait, unless it's something that, aids somebody else to talk about. They're not going to talk about it. So I thought that maybe I'll pivot. Maybe I can make people excited about talking about Sudan if I can actually demonstrate how big of a benefit it would be for our nation's national security, our position as a nation in a continent, and our presence on a continent that is run by people who simply take over. So let's take a look at this one. This one lays out just a few more tidbits than all the others. But this one will tell you a lot more because, it's not just the UAE. Saudi Arabia is involved. Obviously, President Trump in the past couple months has been talking to MBS about the Sudan issue. And it's extremely difficult. Like, what do? Do you use USAID? Do you bring in NGOs? Like, how do you make it work, right? That's the question. How do you make it work? And I think I found the answer. I think the World Food Program being part of the UN and being controlled by the US at the president's discretion, he appoints who's in charge. I think now that Cindy McCain is out, we need to put someone seasoned in there that can not only conduct the duties of the World Food Program, but also give us a segue to tag team the issue with Sudan with the help of Saudi Arabia and other nations. But obviously for us, like I'm not Saudi. If Saudi Arabia prospers or gets something out of it, more power to them. But for me, I care about the people of Sudan and to actually see other people thrive. It's not, you shouldn't be jealous when somebody else thrives and you don't, because that's a you problem, not a them problem. And if this nation can thrive, it will be incredible. It is one of the biggest hubs. So let's take a look at this quick video because this will tell you a lot more.
Crystal, let's talk about the awful tragedy that continues to unfold in Sudan.
Indeed. So let's go ahead and put F1 up on the screen. We wanted to bring you the latest updates, and this is a particularly grim development here. So 2 new mass graves, and this was written up by DropSite that's doing, they're doing a phenomenal job of covering what is the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet, what, is sort of a civil war, but really it's just, mass slaughter and starvation of a lot of civilians. It's also a proxy war. In any case, you're seeing images of these mass graves that were discovered in Khartoum's Al Riyadh neighborhood. DropSite writes the sites contain the remains of thousands of people, according to local sources. Victims were identified as having died under torture in nearby buildings that had been utilized by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, as detention centers and command hubs. Quote, efforts are currently underway to open these graves and transfer the remains into official cemeteries. There's a very large number of people buried there, while other bodies have been buried in schools, universities, and in public places. The Sudanese army regained control of this area in May, and Abdel El explained the delay in uncovering the graves was due to the sheer number of victims. The discovery is part of a massive forensic undertaking by the Sudanese Forensic Medicine Authority, which has already overseen the exhumation of over 15,000 bodies from makeshift graves across Khartoum state. As of late 2025, authorities aim to relocate all remains from residential areas to official cemeteries by mid-2026. So unfortunately, what they're saying here, Emily, is while this grim discovery has been made, it is far from the last that they expect to be made. I mean, we really have very little access as the public and as a global community into understanding this extent of the savagery here and just how much brutality, death, and starvation has occurred.
Right. And we may not know for a long, long time into the future. We could put the next element up on the screen from Dropsite, which reports the Sudanese military announced it has broken the long-standing siege on the city of Dilling in South Kordofan. And they go on and say Dilling lies on a strategic corridor between Kadugli, the besieged state capital of South Kordofan, and Al Obeid, the capital of neighboring North Kordofan, which the RSF has also sought to encircle and besiege. And so what we're looking at, Crystal, is just seemingly no end in sight. Basically, I don't know if that's what you're taking from some of this new stuff, but the international community is paying very little attention to this, and it's all continuing apace.
Well, the positive news here of the breaking of the siege is, worth pausing on. We could put F5, some of the videos that have come out of these celebrations of people as the Sudanese army was able to break this very lengthy siege, one of the longest sieges in modern warfare. So people had no access to food, to medicine, to medical care. So that breakthrough is really significant. You can see people, extremely happy at this. And I did see news this morning also that while you still have millions of people who are displaced, internally displaced in Sudan, you have had some 3 million who have been able to return to their homes. So, you're down a bit from the peak of the mass displacement, but obviously the situation is still incredibly, incredibly dire. And we can put F4 up on the screen here, which breaks down some of the regional power games that are being played, which are fueling this and other conflicts as well. Foreign Policy had 2 good articles here that relate to Sudan. One of them is this one that talks about how you have these rival teams in the Middle East. And you can see this as, in addition to a civil war, you can also see it as a proxy war. They say there's a competition between Abrahamic and Islamic coalitions reshaping the region. Iran's recent domination of headlines from the Middle East amid its violent crackdown on protesters and speculation about possible U.S. military strikes obscures a more consequential regional shift. Tehran is no longer a principal actor shaping the region's strategic trajectory. Instead, the Middle East is entering a new phase defined by competition between 2 emerging blocs, an Abrahamic and Islamic coalition. How this rivalry evolves will do more to determine the region's future and the U.S. role in it. Although still short of formal alliances, these 2 blocs are increasingly coherent. The first side is centered on Israel and the UAE, which is widely suspected of supplying the RSF with weapons to continue to fuel this conflict in spite of an arms embargo. In any case, the UAE extending outward to include Morocco, Greece, and even India. This camp is revisionist in orientation, seeking to reconfigure the region through military power, technological collaboration, and economic integration. And then the Abrahamic coalition, they say, is ascendant. On the other side, you have countries like Saudi Arabia. And so because of this regional rivalry and these regional blocs that are emerging, they are fighting for dominance of this region and access to the Red Sea in particular, which is why you have this conflict continuing to proceed and be fueled and funded. Let's go ahead and put this next foreign policy article up on the screen, which gets into some of those dynamics specifically. They say Red Sea rivalries risk unraveling the Horn of Africa. If Sudan's civil war spreads to Ethiopia, it will be a humanitarian and strategic disaster. So this is the real risk right now, is the possibility that other countries in the region are brought directly into the conflict and that you end up with a conflagration across the Horn of Africa. Dropsite writes, Sudan's civil war, already the world's worst humanitarian disaster, is entering a more dangerous phase as the UAE and RSF threatens to open a new front through Ethiopia. Writing in Foreign Policy, Cameron Hudson and Liam Carr argue the UAE, the main backer of the RSF, may be using Ethiopia to expand supply lines and operations, particularly near the GERD region on Sudan's eastern border. They warn this could further regionalize the war, draw on Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Egypt, and worsen worsen Sudan's humanitarian situation in a widening proxy battlefield for Gulf and regional powers. The authors say Washington understands such an escalation would undermine U.S. Red Sea counterterrorism and maritime interests, but is yet to draw firm red lines. They argue the international community, led by Washington, should do all it can to prevent the emergence of a new Ethiopia-UAE axis in Sudan's war. And, the latest development is apparently Washington is going to host what they're describing as a humanitarian conference in the coming weeks with regard to Sudan. And, the big criticism here is Washington's both disengagement and also, obviously, we have incredible influence over the UAE, which again is widely seen as supplying the RSF. And yet we've done nothing to pressure them to cut off this supply of weapons that continues to fuel this, these horrific atrocities.
Yeah, that's why I'm such a doomer about this. And obviously people on the ground are probably feeling, maybe they feel some hope right now, but a new front in this horrific large-scale conflict, when, by the way, Ryan and I were talking last week, who's doing business with the UAE right now? I don't think anyone will be surprised to know that it's the Trump family, obviously doing plenty of business with the UAE, so their incentives on this are understandably warped given where they're coming from, so that doesn't create a lot of room for optimism, although, I don't know, Crystal,
I don't know. When these lefties talk like they know what they're talking about. Like, it's the left that did this. Obama did this. Bush did this. Obama was the reason they became South Sudan. Molly Feed destroyed them. But look at her face. Oh, yeah, it's all the Trump people. Actually, Trump's trying to stop it. He's been having conversations, and it is one of the most horrific. You can't find a segue in, and I think we nailed the segue with the World Food Program. Because the only way you could do it is to construct a coup from the inside, get a bunch of NGOs, do the protest, get some armed conflict, remove the generals, and it's a hot shit show. And when you've got China, UAE, Russia, and even Saudi Arabia making bank on diamonds and shit and gold, right? And oil, they're not going to let it go. China's not going to let it go. China's going to be like, my shit's already destroyed. They're supposed to be there so I could get oil. They owe me rent. Pay me. So they're talking. This is just a great example to show you just how people talk with authority when they don't understand what they're talking about. The right is worse than the left. The left, at least, is deranged, and they blame everything on Trump, right? When all of this stuff has been happening from a long time ago. Okay. So let me get rid of them because they piss me off just with that statement again. Every time I hear it, I get mad. There's no point in listening to the rest of it because I'm just going to not be happy. I want to be happy. I'm going to be leaving in about, it's 6. Oh shit. I thought it was 7. I was like, leaving. I'm supposed to be leaving my house by 8. I haven't done anything for it. I'm still in Heatless Girls and cooking dinner because I can't let my niece and my mom starve. So let's get with this. Let's just focus on what is imperative for us to know. You have to ask yourself, who decided all of Africa should stay hungry? You're going to be like, but we're talking about Sudan. Well, no, it's all of Africa. Now, that's a question that nobody wants to answer out loud. Absolutely nobody wants to. I'm going to do it. Why didn't they build it? Why hasn't it been built up? Now, it's not why they can't, why can't they build it, right? It's why didn't they? Past tense, deliberate. Because the capacity was always there, right? The land was always there. The water was always there. The soil surveys go back to the fucking 1940s. British colonial agricultural reports that read like an investment perspective. The Jazeera scheme, built in the 1920s between the two Niles, was the largest irrigation project on earth at the time. And it worked. It produced. Sudan was a net food exporter. The British knew exactly what they had in their hands. And then they left. And what they left behind was not an accident. They left borders that cut through ethnic communities and forced incompatible groups into artificial nations. They left administrative structures designed to extract, not to develop. They left the tiny Khartoum-based Arab elite with the keys to the machinery that absolutely had no institutional obligation to anyone in the periphery. They left the railroad that went from the cotton fields to the port so the commodity could leave. And almost nothing that went the other direction to bring the investment back in. So they were just exporting and bleeding. The nation of Sudan was bleeding with the infrastructure that the British created. They didn't build processing plants. They didn't want to build cold storage. They didn't build the roads that would connect the farmer in Darfur to the market in Khartoum. They built what empire needs, export corridors, and they called it development. And that was not incompetence, my friends. That was architecture, deliberate architecture. You build what serves the model. And the model was raw. Legit raw. Raw materials. Manufactured goods in, dependency maintained, leverage preserved. That model did not end when the British left. It just changed management. So now let me tell you something about food. Like, really tell you. Food is not a commodity. Food is a control mechanism. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is recorded, documented history. Even Henry Kissinger said it in the 70s. Control oil, you control nations. Control food, you control the people. That quote is from a national security study memorandum of the 200, a classified document that became U.S. policy in 1975, written under Kissinger's direction. That explicitly identified population growth in developing nations as a threat to American resource access and recommended using food aid as a strategic lever to manage that growth and maintain political influence. Now, and this is where I'm going with this, Kissinger was not wrong. But sometimes you can take a weapon that was created to control and hurt and use it for good. And this is why I wrote those 3 parts about the World Food Program. And this is actually U.S. policy, and it's been in there since 1975. I'm not just like saying it. So you have to ask yourself, like, how do we fix the issues? Because as a nation, you'll be like, well, it's none of our business, but it kind of is, because all the countries that are considered not our friends have their hands in one of the richest pieces of tangible land on the planet. That is now all looking at Africa to develop it. China's been doing it quietly for years, as I've said over the years, but this is it. Now, not every administrator who worked, I should say, like, Africa in general has been living under that architecture, the control the food, control the people, for about 50 years. And not every person that conducted administrative tasks or who worked within it was consciously evil. Most of them thought that they were helping, and especially in these food aid programs. That's how systems like this perpetuate themselves. You don't need everyone to understand the design. You just need the design to keep producing the same outcome. And the outcome has to be consistent, generation after generation, and it has been. Africa stays dependent. Africa stays hungry. Yes. Okay. No. What do you need?
I was just letting you know.
You're out?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is it here?
Okay. I'll try to be ready on time. Okay.
For what? For dinner?
For us leaving, yeah, and going to dinner.
Yeah. You don't need a rush.
Yeah, I do. We got to be out of here by 8.
Guys, it's my first time riding since, like, I want to say September. So
go ride your motorcycle. I'll see you.
I'm going to be gone
I'll pack
a while.
my suitcase too. I'll get it ready.
All right. Don't worry. This is not gear, by the way. I'm putting on gear. I have it somewhere else.
Peace out.
Peace out.
So that was a good hiatus. All right. So let's get back to where we were. So, like, as I was saying, none of these people intentionally, like the food aid people, didn't think that they were doing something bad. They just knew that whatever they were doing was supposed to help. And as long as they didn't understand the grander design, they just work within it, right? And Africa has been staying dependent for 50 years. Africa is staying hungry enough to be managed. Africa never builds the agricultural infrastructure that would make it self-sufficient, because self-sufficient populations don't need you. And populations that don't need you don't give you access to their gold, oil, diamonds, and food. So this is not ancient history. This is the operating logic of the international development system right now. Okay. They're all doing good, but none of the good actually sticks. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, I would watch commercials with Ethiopian kids with distended bellies starving. And I'm like, why? They can plant shit. Why is no one giving them seeds and water? Why is no one building the irrigation? Instead, they're just collecting money to what? Give them a cookie and a Chips Ahoy? Like, that doesn't make sense. But let's put specific numbers down on what, is being left at the table, because I work in receipts, right? So the African continent collectively imports approximately $85 billion in food every year from outside the continent. And this is a continent with 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, meaning they have, if you're like standing on the moon and looking down on this biodome, 60% of it that can be farmed is found in Africa, and it's not being used. It has the largest freshwater lakes on earth, and we have a water shortage. The Congo Basin, the second largest rainforest and river system in the world. The Nile, the River Niger, the Zambezi. Rainfall patterns across the Sahel in East Africa that properly, with properly, I guess, managed irrigation infrastructure, produce year-round growing cycles. The volcanic soil profiles of the East African Rift. The bottomland alluvials of the Nile Basin. 85 billion a year leaving the continent for food from a continent that should be feeding the world. Okay? They should be the ag center of the world, but they're not. Because no one's exploiting that, like not in a bad way, like actually using it. That number isn't a development failure. That number is a policy success for somebody else. Sudan specifically, get this, 84 million hectares of arable land. Damn, right? Imagine how many soybeans you could put on that, right, China? Imagine how much wheat you could put on that. Less than 20% currently under cultivation. Imagine that. And that's before the war destroyed what infrastructure, which was bullshit, existed. The Gezira region between the White and the Blue Niles has soil composition profiles the ag scientists compare to the American Midwest. That's like their Midwest for the world. Seriously, Saint? I have deer in my yard, and he's just going to constantly do this now. He's just going to keep doing this. He's going to keep doing this. I have deer in my yard. I'm going to go get rid of the deer. You guys can give me just a second. I'm going to just put on a song because I have to go deal with the deer. So I apologize. Here we
I'm just an average girl with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And I always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no privacy. I always feel like somebody's watching me. Tell me, is it just a dream? When I come home at night, I bolt the door real tight. People call me on the phone, I'm trying to avoid looking at people on TV, see me, or am I just paranoid? When I'm in the shower, I'm afraid to wash my hair, 'cause I might open my eyes when someone's standing there. People think I'm crazy, just a little touch, but baby showers remind me of psycho too much. That's why I always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no privacy. I always feel like somebody's watching me, who's playing tricks on me.
Are you ready? All right, happy Halloween, everyone.
Hey guys, hope you all enjoyed the video.
I don't know why they're like, hey guys, and it's all dark and black. We can't see you. That was a great reminder that everyone's always watching you. And for me, it was the deer and Nick's trying to open the door. So I apologize for that quick impromptu hiatus, but it is what it is. All right, so let's get back to where I was. I'm trying to kind of like collect myself. Okay, so we talked about the size of Sudan, right? Just so that you can understand how big it is. And you understand just how fertile it is and how everybody wants a piece of that, right? And that only 20% of it is actually being cultivated. And that was, well, before 2023 when shit just went really crazy, right? So gravity-fed irrigation potential from the Nile tributaries, right? That doesn't even require any pumping infrastructure in some quarters. And that's how they can have year-round growing capacity. Now, the climate in northern Gezira produces 2 full crop cycles annually. Sudan was producing, I think, like 4 to 6 million metric tons of sorghum per year before the current war. 500,000 to 750,000, I think. Like, it's under 1 million tons of sesame. Has about 40 million head of livestock. It's one of the largest cattle populations on the continent, right? It produced 70 to 80% of the world's Arabic gum. Again, just to reinforce the size of it, it's the size of Europe. All of Europe. All of it. Every single portion of it. I think a little bit bigger too. But just so you know, the average Sudanese farmer has been living in poverty for like generations. Because none of the value actually stayed. None of the processing happened domestically. None of the export revenue moved through transparent channels that paid taxes, built roads, financed schools. It's like free for all. It moved through military actors and their Gulf partners and offshore accounts. Every bushel of sesame that left Port Sudan without value-added processing was a decision by someone that the Sudanese farmers would stay poor. Every ton of gum, Arabic gum, that left as raw material instead of finished product was a decision that the margin would be captured somewhere else. These decisions that have been made have authors. I mean, someone's always writing that script. They always do. So now let's kind of look at who's in the room right now. So the UAE is not in Sudan because they care about peace. Let's be clear. The UAE has been running an arms for gold operation through the RSF. Right? That's the militia, the Rapid Support Forces. And they're currently committing genocide in Darfur as we speak. And UN panel experts like Amnesty International, which are all corrupt, but they try, and the Sentry, they've all documented with satellite imagery, right? Financial records, intercepted logistic, all that the RSF controls the gold mines in Darfur and Kordofan. The gold moves to Dubai, over $850 million of gold that they could see was moved there in 2024 alone. That's a 70% increase from the year before. Then weapons move back through Chad and Libya. Right? Because and I'm going to quote my bestie here. All right? Because Angela said this. Like, damn, why would XYZ say that? They actually have government experience and they still don't know what they're talking about. Right? Because everyone wants, we just take Hamas. Guys, it's a whole network. It's a whole network, but you have to see where the head of that network lies and how they're doing it to create that civil unrest across the African continent, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa, okay? So Chinese manufactured bombs are re-exported through UAE channels being dropped on civilian populations in Darfur. Now that's the transaction. That's what the ceasefire negotiations have been structured allegedly to protect. But the gold isn't the only thing the UAE wants. The UAE wants the desert nation that imports nearly all its food. So even though they can make food that could feed the whole continent of Africa, the UAE is selling them food because they don't have enough. Their sovereign wealth funds, especially the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, right? The ADIA, right? ADIA and affiliated little subsidiaries and vehicles, they've been acquiring agricultural land rights across the Nile corridor in East Africa since 2008. Some of that shit was in Hunter Biden's laptop. But they've done that really quietly through like all these little side channels and local intermediaries and investment frameworks that don't announce their ultimate beneficial ownership. They just want the land. They want the water rights. They want the production capacity, not to develop it for Sudanese farmers, but to supply their own population, their own food security mandate, and to make some serious dough. And the UAE understands something that Washington has been really slow to internalize. Food security is the new oil. Well, and water security too, but that's a topic for another discussion. But the country that controls the production capacity in the most fertile, most water-rich, most underdeveloped agricultural region on Earth is holding a strategic asset that appreciates every year as global populations grow. Climate stresses increase, right? Supply chain fragility. This is the defining vulnerability of the 21st century. They've been running that play for 15 years. The UAE, they did it in Sudan. They're doing it in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, in Kenya, in Egypt, quietly, methodically, with sovereign wealth capital that doesn't require a return in the next quarter. Now, China, on the other hand, has been in Sudan for 30 years. CNPC, China National Petroleum Corporation. You saw that shit in Hunter Biden's laptop too, right? They built the pipelines, the refineries, the export architecture. They own the infrastructure. They own the debt agreement. Sudan and South Sudan carry Chinese structured debt secured against oil revenues, which means Beijing holds a lien on the production capacity of the most resource-rich quarter in East Africa. The war forced a temporary withdrawal. The CNPC declared force majeure in late 2025, their most significant African crisis in 30 years. But they're not gone. The Chinese are just hanging out and waiting. They're like, yeah, we'll just wait. Because they'll return the moment the ceasefire holds. And with rehabilitation proposals that they've already got in the drawer waiting. They're written, their financing is already structured, and the terms that will actually trade Sudanese resource sovereignty for Chinese restructuring money. Are you understanding where I'm going with this? The Belt and Road investment across Africa hit 61 billion in 2025. That's a 283% increase. China's not retreating from Africa. China's doubling down on Africa because China has correctly identified Africa as the defining strategic theater for the next 50 years. I mean, this is why the WEF says, what is it, Project 2068, 2069, whatever the fuck they call it. It's all about Africa. Now, why do you think that all these, Arab kingdoms are building like these houses where they're like tubes and they could fit a shit ton of people in just one line? Because they're fixing to take these countries and then stick their people in there to fucking work the land. It's going to be, work camps. But they'll own nothing and love it though, right? That's how it is. Is that the world we want for the future? I don't think so. But demographics, resources, agricultural capacity, market growth, China's there. And Russia's also there, playing both sides of the Sudan war, supplying the SAF for the naval base access port in Sudan that they got, while Wagner's successor outfit holds the gold mining concessions at the RSF territory. And the Gulf states are there. And our country just keeps showing up late to the fucking funeral, okay? But here's what I want you to understand about the future. The future is Africa. This is not a development professional's talking point. This is a demographic and resource reality that every serious strategic analyst has known for decades. And that American foreign policy has structurally refused to act on because institutions that shape our Africa policy were built to manage the continent's crises, not develop its potential. And this is why I hit with the World Food Program. And this is why we need people that are well seasoned. Like I went through every single person that has ever gone through Africa, that's in African relations. And I found a couple. I mean, we've got Tom right now as a special envoy, but he's not that seasoned. I could tell you that by 2050, Africa will hold approximately 2.5 billion people, considering that a lot of those nations didn't really take the COVID vaccine. Okay. Now, a quarter of the human population is going to be just there. The median age right now that they have is 19. So they've got very young people. And it's the youngest continent on earth, meaning youngest in, like, when you have statistics and you say, well, how old is, like, we have, 400 billion people in the United States. What's the average age? You know what? We got Grok. We can ask him. Hey, Grok, can you tell me what is the median age in the United States right now? Oh, I have my headphones on. It's not listening to me. Stop. What is the median age in the United States? He's thinking. 39.1 years old. So the median age in the United States is 40. So basically, if you were to kind of like represent the nation of the United States, and you would say, who represents the majority of the United States, it would be a bunch of 40 somethings. 39-year-olds. But in Africa, the continent of Africa, 19. Young, ready, and able to work. At 40, you're like, what am I doing for retirement? Out, my hip hurts. Oh shit. I'm hearing cracks when I get up. The potential of the continent of Africa is insane because that's where the future is. Wait till we do our map thing, then you'll get more of that. You'll understand more of that. So think about that. It's considered the youngest continent on Earth because across the whole continent, their average age is 20. We're double in age. We're old because we're not making babies. And not only that, they have young people that can plow and do things, right? Because they have them. Sudan and, well, all of Africa, the African continent, has the most arable land, the most uncultivated agricultural potential, the largest deposits of critical minerals, cobalt, lithium, coltan, manganese, niobium, gold, diamonds, shit that every electric vehicle, every battery, every piece of next-gen technology requires. So whoever has deep, trusted structural relationships within African governments and African populations in 2050, they control the material inputs of the global economy and the largest consumer market on earth. And China has been building those relationships for 30 years through infrastructure, through debt, through agricultural investment, through training programs, academic exchanges, and military partnerships, through showing up consistently with money and capacity. So when African governments need something built, well, they got the Chinese. We've been showing up with emergency food aid and democracy lectures and then leaving. That's not sustainable. That's not a strategic position. That is posture that guarantees we're the junior partner in the most important theater of the century. And Sudan is where we need to change that right now. While the architecture is still being built, before the Chinese reconstruction financings become default, before the UAE land acquisitions complete the enclosure of the Nile agricultural corridor, before that window closes. And let me tell you what the alternative looks like, specifically in operations. The World Food Program has 21,000 staff. It operates in 123 countries. It runs the largest civilian logistics operation on Earth, larger in any supply reach and operational complexity that most national militaries have. In Sudan specifically, the World Food Program is the largest operational humanitarian presence in the country. It's a fucking potato right now, okay? Gaza, egg on face. It has relationships with every community structure, every local authority, every corridor that food moves through. It has the trust of populations, and that trust, is scarce. Like, nobody trusts anyone anymore. in the World Food Program they trust. And then again, let me reiterate how Hunter Biden was part of the World Food Program. Remember, there's a reason for that. Now, that infrastructure, those relationships, those logistics network, that institutional presence is not just a humanitarian tool. It's a development platform. It is the pre-built distribution architecture that any serious agricultural investment program needs to function on scale. So here's what it looks like if you use it correctly. American agricultural technology, precision farming, drip irrigation systems, soil analysis to drought-resistant seed varieties developed by American land-grant universities, cold chain logistic, moves to Sudan through the World Food Program's operational infrastructure, not as aid, but as an investment, as the inputs for community-owned cooperative farms, right? Structured to produce exportable surplus at market prices. The DFC, which is the Development Finance Corporation, provides capital structure. The USDA provides a technical extension network. The World Food Program provides the distribution architecture and the community relationship. Saudi Arabia co-invests because they want the food security output, and they have every reason to limit the UAE dominance in the corridor. And then there's the gold export mechanism, currently running through the RSF, controlled mines, that they have. And it goes all the way just to Dubai arms dealers. It gets replaced, if we can do this right, with US-backed transparent commodity exchange, conflict-free mining certification, blockchain provenance tracking, revenue flowing through agricultural development funds instead of military accounts. You don't need to fight the UAE on this directly. You make their mechanism obsolete by building a better one. The oil infrastructure, it's currently sitting damaged and abandoned, right? After the CNPC force majeure, right? But it gets pre-positioned for American energy sector involvement before the Chinese rehab proposals, become the only option on the table. We need to give them options. Do you want to be with the Chinese where they can rebuild that shit? Or do you want us? We're bringing you food, we're going to give you this, and we'll all work together, right? The DFC Supply Chain Resiliency Initiative extended to Sudanese energy infrastructure. That's genius. 6 to 18 months post-ceasefire. That's our window. And the debt restructuring, Sudan's external debt is approximately, 60 billion? Much of it is in default. Significant portions of that structured debt is to Chinese creditors with resource secured term. And it could get renegotiated through IMF framework with American backing. In fact, I would even say, we'll pay that 60 billion, China, take it, get the fuck out. That's what I would do. I mean, we're already in debt. Why not another 60 billion? And I get to not only do good, but also ensure that a whole continent is operating. And in exchange, I have a presence there. I don't let the Chinese take over. I don't let people strangulate my country. That's the way it is. And just so you understand that this isn't charity. This isn't foreign aid in the traditional sense. This is strategic investment framework that simultaneously builds American agricultural and energy sector presence in East Africa, creates a structural economic relationship with Sudanese civilian institutions rather than military actors, breaks the Chinese and Gulf leverage mechanisms, and produces food security outcome that matters to every African government, watching what America does in Sudan. And when Sudan is producing exportable agricultural surplus, and it will, if this investment happens, who does Ethiopia buy from? Uganda, the Sahel? They buy from their neighbor. They buy from the country whose American designed irrigation system and American finance cooperative and American commodity exchange connections make the surplus possible. That's how you build influence that lasts. Not through military basing agreements that fucking fall apart the moment the government changes. Through food. Through systems that produce it. Making every citizen there having the potential to be rich themselves and not be impoverished. Through relationships with farmers and co-ops and local institutions that actually own the infrastructure. You control populations with food and water. That's not cynical, that's physics. The country that feeds you has a relationship with you that no competitor can easily displace. China understood this, the UAE understood it, Saudi Arabia understood it, the British Empire understood it 100 years ago and built the Gezira scheme to serve it. The question is whether our nation understands it now, right? Because I want to be specific about the stakes if we don't act. If China returns to Sudan first, and they will return, with capital ready, with proposals, they're drafted, like I said. They'll finance the reconstruction of the oil infrastructure on the terms that give Beijing continued leverage over South Sudanese and Sudanese production revenues for a whole bunch of generations. They will build the roads and the ports and the grain storage facilities that should have been built 50 years ago. And they will do it in a way that creates dependency, not partnership. That's their model. It works, and it's worked across the continent. Now, why am I saying this now? Well, maybe there were leaks, or maybe someone was flapping their mouth on Chinese prospects. Well, China already has a foot in there. They're already owed money. Russia just got a port. The fuck does America have? Absolutely nothing. We have Molly Fee to show for. She fucked it all up. Everyone blames Obama for the whole South Sudan shit. And Bush. Okay? You should read those articles. They're pretty long, but it'll educate you to understand the source. Because when we talk about the Middle East, we only focus on the nations that your talking heads talk about because they're not educated enough to understand the bigger scheme. When you want to control a region, you go for the food. And that is the food center of Africa. Not Nigeria, not Ghana, not Kenya, not Ethiopia, not Djibouti, not Somalia, fucking Sudan. Sudan. And so the other countries are already there. We're not there. The only foot in the door we have is the World Food Program. So rather than us use that as a political appointment, we should use that as a strategic, segue for us to actually have a presence in there. Because for me, I care about my country. And I also care about other people that aren't in my country too. I mean, why shouldn't the Sudanese farmers, have money? Why are they, sending out, all this food out? The Saudis are taking it and they're selling them fucking food. These people it's like sitting on a farm with lush land and buying meat and wheat from your neighboring country because you're not planting it. Why aren't you planting it? Yeah, because we get money by just pillaging shit. I mean, that's basically what's happening. And it is the core center of this whole conflict in the Middle East. I'm telling you. And the thing is, Saudi Arabia wants to shut up the UAE. They're friends, but not really. Not really. Not friends. So they're like, So President Trump has been having these conversations with MBS. They have, kind of put projections on, like the Saudis have, done great schematics on how to aid with the boom in the population. Because if the average age on the African continent is 19, that means in 10 years, we're going to have a lot more babies, a shit ton more babies, a ton of them. Because for some reason in Africa, they all have a high sex drive, so high that they'll even participate in experiments and have sex with HIV positive hookers for universities. I still can't get over that. It's been years since I heard that. I'm sorry. But it's really interesting, right? That this is happening right now, that we've got this vacancy because it's the perfect segue. We've got a 16 to 18 month window. That's about all we have. Now, the concern that I have that is if the UAE actually completes its agricultural land acquisition program in the Nile corridor, which is proceeding right now through the conflict, through shell companies and local intermediaries and investment vehicles, that's not going to show up in the headlines. But they'll own the production capacity that will manage their food security, not for Sudanese farmers, right? It'll be productive. The land will. The technology, they'll bring it in there. And the value will leave Sudan exactly the way it is, as it has always done that. And to be fair, Sudan will remain what it always has been, a previous management arrangement, a source, place things. I guess we're just using them. The whole world is just using them. They just take. And that is the alternative that the Sudanese have to American engagement. Not chaos and starvation forever. The chaos and starvation are temporary. They always are. But a reconstructed Sudan that is strategically aligned with Beijing and Abu Dhabi and locked into the same extraction model is going to be under new management through the UAE. And that's what we're choosing if we don't show it up. We need to turn up. And the beauty of this is, and I want you to understand this clearly, is that by doing right by the Sudanese people and doing right by the American strategic interest is actually the same thing. Like, it's a win-win. This is not a tension. This is not a choice between values and interests. Building agricultural infrastructure that Sudanese farmers own and operate creates food security for Sudanese families and creates a structural relationship that American influence in East Africa requires. Transparent commodity markets that pay Sudanese miners, and farmers market prices that undermine the UAE arms for gold loop, and produce the governance conditions that make long-term investments viable. We can pre-position American energy sector involvement in Sudan's oil infrastructure, and that prevents the Chinese dominance of East African energy and creates returns for American investors. And we can also keep an eye on Russia, right? Because they've got a Navy base now for the next 25 years as of a couple months ago. Now, this is what genuine strategic alignment looks like. Just so you guys understand, these are always the things that I wanted to conduct, and I thought we were conducting throughout my past career. But we were not. It was all pillaging in some shape or form. Always one-sided and not giving a fuck what vacuums we leave. Now, imagine strategically placing the United States like that. That convergence doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you design the investment correctly, when you structure it so that the value stays in the country, when you build the kind of relationship that doesn't require military presence to maintain, but it's held together by economic interdependence and a genuine shared benefit. China builds things in Africa that Africans depend on but don't own. That creates leverage, but it also creates resentment, right? We've seen that backlash. We have seen how African governments, one after another, renegotiating Chinese debt and looking for alternatives. The appetite for an alternative to the Chinese model is real. And the Sudanese people who tried to build a democracy in 2019 and had it stolen by generals that were backed by Obama's people and the Brits and the UAE and well, they're not looking for another patron who treats their country as a resource depot. The people of Sudan, they're actually looking for a partner who will help them build something that belongs to them. And that is the opening we need to get in, right? It's the genuine opening. It's like you go in and it's like, the world is your oyster. We're here. And it requires us to show up with a fundamentally different model than the extraction architecture that has defined every previous outside engagement with Sudan. And the World Food Program is the vehicle. Agricultural investment is the mechanism. Sudan is the beachhead. And East Africa, well, the most strategically significant agricultural and demographic theater on earth is the prize. And the window, I said 16 to 18 months. I want to say 12 to 18 months because things are... Once there's a ceasefire, before the default financing arrives from Beijing, before the land acquisitions close, before the architecture gets in concrete for another generation, we need to step in. The question has never been whether America has the capacity to do it. We can totally do it. The question is whether we have the will to finally understand what we're looking at. I mean, Africa's the future. Sudan is the door. And the question is, are we going to walk through it or not? You know, that is the big question. Are we going to walk through that door or not? Are we going to actually change the way things are done? That is the key here, because we keep doing the same thing. You know, Sudan is like the country everybody forgot. It's at the exact spot where the biggest rivers in human history come together. The White Nile and the Blue Nile. They converge. They form the single most important waterway on the African continent. And the land that surrounds it is just like extraordinary. And yet here we are. They've got oil, they've got gold, they've got diamonds, they've got the biggest piece of earth that can be farmed year-round. They make gum arabic, which is the ingredient in your Coca-Cola. So you should ask yourself, all these big corporations, all these nations, they just exploit them. And the thing is, the US has never bothered with it. They just let people exploit them and they get some shit on the side too. Under President Trump, we can make changes. We could start using our positioning, our programs like the World Food Program to segue a solid relationship with the Sudanese and then come in. This will actually also kill terrorist activities. You know why? Because most of these guns and bombs get rounded out through Sudan. Remember, these nations like Russia, China, UAE, even Saudi Arabia, all right, MBS, I'm calling you out. They all have these like arms for gold, trade-offs. And that's what they're doing. And that is it. And I envision a future for this world, and I'm planting this seed. And I know it's a tree that I will never sit under and enjoy the shade, but I'm pretty sure other generations will. And that should make us all happy. Like a world where no one's hungry and everyone is happy. And you're going to be like, what's happy? Well, I guess content. Well, we're always learning and we're producing. We're making things. We don't have to grind. That's an illusion. And this is kind of like an inclinage to it. I know you're going to be like, no, I have to grind. I got to do my 9 to 5. Wait, no. Topic for another story. But in this sense, it's not utopic or far-fetched to say, holy shit, I'll drop serious irrigation, give them serious ag. I'll blockchain all their freaking transactions, who's buying gold, who's not. Miners are actually going to get money, not killed when they don't want to work, right? The infrastructure that I give them is going to be theirs. I'm not going to say I own it, right? It's your infrastructure because the World Food Program will give it to you because that is the charity portion of it. But then the US is going to come in and give you all the programs. And then the oil, all this shit that China did is bullshit. Look at us. We've developed all these things. Let's help you. And that helps us maintain some presence in the energy sector and be like, listen, if we're doing this, we'll just charge you like rent until you pay it off. And then just give us a discount, like 5%. You could sell like this for 100, but give us a discount because we built it for you. That's basically a good win-win relationship. And on top of that, we can tell them that, hey, if anybody comes to fuck up your gold or take your food or destroy your farms or fuck up anything, we've got your back. You're now a partner with the US. And that's it. We need to start focusing on this because it'll actually take out a lot of the terrorist funding. Like all these side pockets, it will be gone. And that's why I wrote that 3-part series, because I think why are they constantly barking today? Like, this is crazy. But this is basically why I put out those 3 pieces, because nobody talks about Sudan. Nobody talks about the massacres that are happening right now. And it's just 2 generals. And it's extremely hard to actually turn around and say, well, let's just take them out. No, you can't just take them out, because then that has repercussions. You've got Russia sitting at the port. You've got China over here. You got the UAE saying, oh, you're fucking on my group. Like this is my gold corridor. Nuh-uh. So don't. And Jackie just reminded me that I have about an hour left. True. Oh my God. An hour to pack and do. Now, I want to show you how US-China superpower has a showdown. And this is a video that I saw. It's a longer documentary, but I only want to show portions of it, the beginning and somewhere in the middle. But this is from France 24. It's quite interesting watching it, because it's what they omit to say. I've always said that. How many times have I said, it's not what they're telling you, it's what they're not telling you, right? So now, after the discussions we've had today in regards to that, for those of you that will take the time to read these, which, by the way, as I said, I wrote a policy document. It was like 14 pages, but, the words were just 3,000. These articles, one is like 7,000, the other one's like 5,000. It's like freaking thorough read. When you read those, you'll know everything. There is nothing. And I try to explain it in a way where it's digestible, because to be a self-governing citizen, you have to be a self-aware citizen and understand the positioning of your nation. We can't just hoorah, yeah, let's go. That's not how it works. So let me get this. This video is pretty good. So let me get it ready for you guys. All right, here we go.
Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee. Halloween edition this week, so stay tuned for news on mummies at the museum at the end. But for now, I'm joined by 4 distinguished international correspondents who'll be looking over the significant global events of the past 7 days with me. And it's been a week that Britain's king took away his brother's title in an astonishing press release. Andrew, the royal formerly known as the Prince, will also lose his 32-roomed mansion at Windsor after being served a formal notice to vacate, being downgraded instead to the lodgings at the Royal Sandringham Estate at King Charles's expense. It comes days after the posthumous release of a memoir by Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent victims of Jeffrey Epstein, detailing her accounts of being trafficked by him, made to have sex with him 3 times. Well, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor denies the allegations. It was a week billed as a press political clash of the titans. The meeting between the two, the first time in 6 years. Global markets rattled by the stop-start tariff wars. Beijing restricting the exports of the essential rare earth minerals it has control of. After a 100-minute meeting in South Korea, President Trump described it as outstanding. Analysts said it's sketchy and temporary, a tactical pause. We'll look at the wider implications.
It was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made. Well, I guess on the scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12.
It's been a week that's seen horrific violence in Sudan, door-to-door merciless killings of unarmed civilians, claims of ethnic cleansing as soldiers of the paramilitary group the Rapid Support Force captured El Fasher after a 500-day siege. It was the last city in Darfur under the control of the rival Sudanese armed forces, and now effectively partitions the country. We can look at who can stop the war.
Can anyone here say that we did not know this was coming? We cannot hear the screams, but as we sit here today, the horror is continuing. Women and girls are being raped, people mutilated and killed with utter impunity.
It's been a week that's seen a catastrophic hurricane rip across the Caribbean. Jamaica's Prime Minister warned of a Category 5 storm of the century. At least 19 people were killed. 90% of the buildings in the west of the country estimated to have been badly damaged, with the true extent still emerging. And catastrophic flooding too in Cuba and Haiti.
This hurricane has really devastated us, not only from the tourism aspect of it, but every livelihood that you can think of has been severely disrupted. The fishermen, oh boy, I don't know how they're going to manage. I don't know how any of us are going to manage, how we're going to recuperate from this.
It is time to meet tonight's trick-or-treaters. Let's introduce the panel. We're joined by Emma Kate Simmons, the Paris-based writer and editor of Frank Tireur magazine, columnist at New World magazine too. Evening, Emma Kate.
Good evening.
Friend of the programme, and I'm glad you're here this week because back in 2017, you did one of the most nuanced, detailed accounts I've seen of the behind-the-scenes of Brigitte Macron, her effect on the president during the election campaign. Back this week, we've seen 10 people in court, this cyber-bullying trial against her. We've seen also her daughter in court talking about the impact of her mother. What have you made of this case? And then bringing it.
Well, it's the latest there's a series of cases that have been brought by the Macron couple, and this is the 10 French conspiracy theorists who have been tracking Brigitte Macron, some of them for more than 5 years, claiming falsely that she's a man, that she's in fact her brother, that she may be the father of Emmanuel Macron. Nothing is factual, nothing makes sense. They're all in court, absolutely persisting with the lunacy that Brigitte Macron is a man or a transgender, insisting that they're absolutely right and giving more fuel to the fire across the Atlantic, where Candace Owens, a hateful conspiracy theorist, and we've written a lot about this at Conspiracy Watch, where I work on the global side with Rudy Reichstadt. Candace Owens is also being sued by the Macrons over in the US, but she started with the French side. The French conspiracy theorists sold her their fake theories, and they're comparing themselves to Flaubert and saying that they've invented characters like Madame Emma Bovary. It's absurd, but it's slander, and it's extremely dangerous for democracy.
And Candace Owens has been making millions out of YouTube, her YouTube account, a very successful career as a result of those slanderous allegations. Let's also bring in Caroline Deer, the Paris correspondent for ARD, the German network, contributor to Deutsche Welle as well. Thank you for being with us tonight. I know, given what Emma Kate has just been saying, you've been following this case very closely for ARD this week.
I think it's an important trial as well, but it also shows how hard and how difficult it can be to file lawsuits in those cases, because you have to know that 2 of the conspiracy theorists that had been in court this week had already been convicted last year in another trial, but then been acquitted in the appeal, and they now have to go to court before court again, but for another reproach. So this time it was cyber harassment. Last time it was defamation, and the court in last year said defamation is not the case. We cannot actually say that this was a case of defamation. So this shows how really hard it is to get those rumors to die down. But the Macrons tried, and I think it's important that they try, even if you could argue that every time you talk about it again, it only gives them a case of resonance.
To which point, pretty much the spouse of kings and queens and prime ministers and presidents over the years, go back to Marie Antoinette, have suffered the slings and arrows of insults. And there are questions, aren't there, sort of counter to that, suggesting, is it a good idea to be chasing this? Can they really quash it? Or are they giving fuel to the fire of rumours? Exactly.
I think of course, it does bring up those rumors again if you talk about them. But then again, in my opinion, you cannot accept that those people can actually say on the internet whatever they want and nobody ever does anything about it. And secondly, the Macrons also argue that because Brigitte Macron is being asked about those rumors every time she goes abroad and meets representatives of other countries, they argue it's also a question of France's safety and reputation as a state. And so this is also why they have decided to actually bring this before court, and not only in France, but also in the US.
Great to have you with us, Caroline, Emma Kate as well. Let's move to Cyril Payen, senior international reporter at France 24, former correspondent in Bangkok, in Jerusalem. Evening to you, Cyril. One thing we should talk about is your quest, a number of other correspondents as well, trying to do the same, to report from Gaza. It's been brief embeds, but now we're in the ceasefire. Is there any sign of that happening?
Well, and as we speak, I've been talking with our correspondent, Rami Abu Jamous, which is in northern Gaza. The Israeli tanks are just moving again, despite the ceasefire. So for my career, I've been 30 years, trying to sneak in places, covering wars, and this is a very huge sense of frustrations because there's been now more than 2 years and no way. We have been trying tunnels, the maritime way to get in Gaza. Everything has been tried and we have no access. And it's a really key question about what's going on. For instance, we have a ceasefire, as you said, but we are observing a kind of way of the Israeli army is handling the Lebanese ceasefire. I mean, you have a ceasefire, but Lebanon, southern Lebanon especially, is bombarded every day. I was there during the start of the offensive 1 year ago. And we look at the same strategy apparently in Gaza. And despite the big no from the United States saying you have to move on now with the next steps. And so it's quite worrisome. And again, without any witness, we don't have even the luxury to do conspiracy theory. This is actually really something extremely bad, which is actually happening on the ground. And it will last for memories. And I wonder, as for myself, what I will tell to my children one day.
Now, the constant refrain from Israel is that it's not safe enough, that the journalists could be murdered by Hamas. There's been brief hour-long, 2 hour-longs, half-a-day embeds where they give journalists brief access. From your point of view, you're not interested.
Not at all. There won't be any. I was based 4 years in this region. I know Gaza, and there is no reason why we should be embedded only. And nobody's. There is a choice when you choose to have some people embedded. It's like the NGOs now coming in. It looks like very much they under the influence of the Trump administration. They won't be the usual NGO who used to work on the ground in Gaza in the near future, but more evangelist NGO chosen by Washington and also by Israel. So this is something which is quite dystopic, and this is very, very sadly the reality. And again, we are not here to have independent eyes. And I just remind that 240 local journalists have been killed in Gaza in 2 years.
It is an astonishing figure, and great to have you with us as well, Cyril Payen, as well tonight. Also completing our lineup later in the programme when we talk about the Andrew, formerly Prince scandal. We'll go across the channel and speak to the writer and broadcaster Stephen Bates, the former royal correspondent at The Guardian as well, to understand the extent of what is going on in the UK right now. We will begin with the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now, according to the UN. The war in Sudan, the situation in the city of El Fasher in Darfur under siege for 500 days. It was just gone midday local time, Sunday, when the first reports came out of the city. The RSF, the Rapid Support Force, the paramilitary militia, seized the army headquarters of the rival Sudanese armed forces in the city, its last stronghold in Darfur. The forces, known as the SAFs, withdrew from El Fasher without any official comments that day. By evening, the RSF declared full control. 26,000 civilians were then reported to have fled. And for those who couldn't, evidence quickly emerged of horrific violence, torture, door-to-door targeted killings of men, women, children murdered as they tried to flee. Verified footage too grim to show, filmed by RSF soldiers themselves as they carried out the acts. And journalists can't get in or access to Darfur. Jonathan Rugman at Channel 4 News reported on the videos coming out of El Fasher, filmed by the RSF.
Back in Darfur, Dagalo's fighters are now holding hundreds of prisoners at gunpoint. They're all criminals, says the man in charge.
Well, the man in charge, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, Hameti as he's known, the group's leader, has admitted to, quote, violations, says he's ordered an investigation. The country is now effectively partitions. SAF control the east, the RSF to the west, and neither of the two belligerents are waging war with their own resources, each backed by an external patron. And evidence shows the RSF has the UAE behind it, who are providing armed support and drones, getting access to vast gold reserves in return, despite denials from Doha. The Sudanese armed forces are supported by Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, though to a lesser extent. Cyril, let's begin with you. What you've made of developments this week, the echoes of Darfur 20 years ago.
Very much so, and also to do the parallel with Gaza, because it's really, we're talking about the dark hole. This is a place where you can't go, you can't report. Darfur is a place which is led to extreme.
So Mr. Bangkok and Jerusalem reporter is telling us all this. One question you should ask yourself is, this nation, what is their history and why are they so important? Right? And that's key here. Why are they so important? And, why have they been held like this? So to end today's segment, because my article, I believe I wrote that, part 1, 2, and 3, and even on Substack, I left them without a paywall so people can read them. I think it's a really important thing for, as Americans, especially when we observe foreign policy and our taxpayer dollars are being used for those actions, to be completely understood by us. We have to understand these positions that presidents, fill, and how they're being filled, and who's speaking for us, and who's doing what for us. It's extremely important, because if we don't understand how we operate externally, then we can never take hold of our internal. And I say this because our internal politics, our domestic policy, is reflected in our foreign policy. Right now, our foreign policy is peace through strength. We're demonstrating our strength. We're telling them we're going to fuck you up if you stay out of line. And it has to be fair, right? And we're doing a good job at it. And we need to stop this pillaging, complete pillaging. We are changing the way things are done. I mean, I did a show on how the First Lady has, done something historic at the UN Security Council. And nobody mentioned it. I mean, the next day, the White House, gave her a nod. But it's like, I feel like this administration has to keep patting themselves on their back because there's a bunch of idiots reporting. And to be fair, most of these people are talking to people that don't understand. My audience is actually educated. They're smart. They understand things, and they actually want things done. And it all starts with understanding our position as a nation, because we could sit there and rat off, oh, I don't want war. And it's like, you don't know what's going on. These are rumors of wars, we don't know. But I already told you how this is going to play out in my old show. I've been giving you that information. So many people are shocked about dragon's breath. We did a whole show on that. Epstein was growing the plants. Of course he was. That's in the files that you will have access to when you have all the codes, because each of you have to have a code from each hardcover volume, and then you get with another 3 people, which are highly specific. I am so good at this shit to just bury it. So keep at it. Now the post office is gonna have to pay me, because I'm paying the extra charges to resend all this shit out. How about that, bitches? and please use the honor system. So let me tell you about Sudan. It's actually my favorite type of music to listen to, aside from mashups, right? And I think Angela, when she was with me down south that way last year, you know, and I think our driver, if I remember correctly, I know Angela's not on here, but she'll concur. I was like, oh shit, that's Nubian. Put it on. What's Nubian? And this is where we're going to next. I want to show you a brief history of what Sudan really is and what they were. It's always that the biggest kingdoms of the past are always used and abused in the future, right? Isn't that the way it always goes? It's pretty sad if you think about it. But let's take a look at this. It's a pretty nice video, and it kind of gives a wholesome one. I mean, it's not, but you'll enjoy this. You probably didn't know most of this either.
World, it's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview, and welcome back to my series, A Closer Look. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at the Nubian people. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. To begin, the term Nubia itself doesn't really have a legitimate historical basis, but it's often used to refer to the various groups of people who live just south of an agreed upon Egyptian border. The idea of a specific Nubian people that we identify today are a people whose identity has been created strictly based on the diversity of Sudanese history. In other words, they're a collection of the various people groups that began to form an identity mostly after the Arab invasion of the region. The Nubian ethnic group today consists of a people who carry ancient Sudanese ancestry and ancestry from intermarriage with foreigners, largely Arab. So let's keep that in mind. The Nubian people identify their ancestral homeland as a stretch of land along the Nile River that covers hundreds of miles south from the first cataract near Aswan in Egypt to around the fourth cataract in northern Sudan. The Nubian languages are classified as an Eastern Sudanic language, a branch of the Nilo-Saharan group. Nubian-speaking peoples may have started to migrate from the Kordofan and Darfur regions of western Sudan to the Nile Valley about 2,000 years ago, settling in the Kushite Empire. According to a scholar at the University of Cologne, two now Nubian languages survive today: Nobin, previously known as Mahas, spoken in southernmost Egypt and northern Sudan, and Kenzi Dongolawi. Kenzi is spoken north of Mahas in Egypt, while Dongolawi is spoken in the south around Dongolo. Kenzi and Dongolawi are considered dialects of the same language. There are an estimated 605 Nobin speakers and around 1 million Kenzi Dongolawi speakers. There can be no doubting the antiquity of Nubian people, as they have ancestry deriving from the most ancient Nubian cultures and people in the first African civilization of Tassedi. After the fall of the various Nubian kingdoms and empires in the region, many of the Nubian people in that region first converted to Christianity via their interactions with Christianized Egyptians in the north. Less than a century later, Nubians were resisting Arab dominance in the region and later intermarried with them. Intermarriage with Arabs led to the gradual conversion of the Nubian matrilineal kinship system to the Arab-Muslim patrilineal system, shifting control of Nubian properties and princedoms to Muslims, and the adoption of Islamic religious practices by not only the ruling elite, but by the wider population as well. Nubian villages were built as close to the Nile as possible. Their economy is based on subsistence farming, animal husbandry, and date production. For centuries, the scarcity of cultivable land, especially in Lower Nubia, encouraged the migration of male Nubians in search of work, leaving most of the agricultural work to women, children, and old men. Water wheels, an invention introduced during Roman times, were used in some areas for irrigation up until the 1960s. Nubian kinship is based around tribe systems. The people favor cross-cousin marriage, in which marriage occurs between the children of two siblings of the opposite sex. Nubians today are Sunni Muslim and adhere to the Maliki school. After Great Britain assumed control of Egypt and Sudan between 1880 and 1900, the Nubians were generally left in peace and for the first time free of invading armies. But as the Nile waters began to rise after the completion of the first Aswan Dam in 1902, the fate of Nubian people and much of their history was sealed. Despite the destruction wrought by the creation of the Aswan Dam, much of Nubian culture survived. In particular, Nubian music and dance have become internationally popular. Traditionally, Nubian music integrates percussion instruments such as the bongo and hand clapping. Today, it also incorporates salsa and samba rhythms. Interestingly enough, Nubian musicians have brought on inspiration from Jamaican reggae artists, more specifically Bob Marley. The first dam and its subsequent elevation in 1912 and 1933 crippled Lower Nubia's agricultural system and had a profound social and cultural impact. While Nubian men had always left their villages in search of work, either as mercenaries or laborers, the increasing loss of Nubia's very limited agricultural land accelerated the labor migration. By the 1960s, 60% of Egyptian Nubia had been destroyed or rendered unfit for habitation, and 70,000 Egyptian Nubian men and women were living outside of Nubia. Those who had remained in the villages were overwhelmingly women, children, and the elderly. The collective Nubian identity has been celebrated in poetry, novels, music, and storytelling. They use their own writing form, and many still practice scarification, even though that tradition is beginning to die down amongst the youth. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, please consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.
That was a good summary. There's a lot more. And for those of you that like ancient history, you should look at the Kingdom of Kush. And for those of you that don't know, Jesus' mom actually came from south of Aswan in Egypt and spoke Nubian. Let's take a quick break because we're going to have a segment of what the fuck is Thune doing in all of this? And that is where my source of inspiration came. Thune. So let's take a quick break. I have a cool reimagined, it's like a creepy reimagined video, but remake of the song that Stevie Wonder did, Superstition. I found it fascinating and I watched it. I think you'll like it. So have a quick listen before we get to the what the fuck is Thune doing segment.
Superstition, writings on the wall. Every superstition, ladder's about to fall. 13-month-old baby broke the looking glass. 7 years of bad luck, good things in your past. When you believe in things that you don't understand, and you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. Rid me of the problem. Do all Superstition ain't the way. Every superstition, nothing more to say. Every superstition, the devil's on his way. 13-month-old baby broke the looking glass. 7 years of bad luck, good things in your past. You believe in things that you don't understand, and you suffer. Superstition ain't the way.
Actually found that pretty interesting, but the song's lyrics were slowed down enough for people to listen to them. And we should always be listening to the lyrics because they tell us something. Now let's get into the segment on what the fuck is Thune doing. Okay, so I will direct my listeners to find on my website, torisays.com, an article that I wrote about some senators that went to Helsinki when President Trump went to meet Putin back in 2018. Just look at the list of senators, look at what I said. And also remember that one time that President Trump was at Mount Rushmore, I was speaking with a friend that was a reporter on the telephone. And as I was talking to them, in the background chatter, I heard someone saying to Thune, "Hey, are you going to stay?" And I asked my friend, "Who's he talking to? Is he talking to Thune?" "They're talking right behind you. I'm going to record our call," which I did. And so, as asked, you know what Thune said? "Fuck that guy. I can't stand Trump. I'm doing what I need to do to get my shit done. What interests me? I don't want to sit around and listen to this guy mouth off." I got that on the record. Thune, you should start fessing up. Because I'm going to tell you, when this whole nepotism shit comes out, you know, I'll help him just to bury you. So, why am I saying nepotism? Now, I don't know how many people do know, but right now, Luke Lindbergh is the USDA's Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs. And he, according to mainstream media, is a leading contender for the position that Cindy McCain's resignation just opened up, which the World Food Program chief or executive director. And that's always been appointed by the president. Now, Agro Latin America says that a source close to the World Food Program said that Lindbergh had effectively been told that the job was his. Now, this is Latin America saying it. Now, Lindbergh isn't an idiot, but he doesn't have experience in what we need to get done with the World Food Program. We need to start looking at these programs differently, because we can't be relying on stupid NGOs that give us blind spots and start funding studying minnows off the coast of fucking Oman. Okay? And there's a nepotism concern. And it's real. And, by the way, it's documented. And this went completely underreported, but I see everything. Lindbergh is actually personally linked to congressional leadership through his wife, Brittany. Our Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, is Lindbergh's father-in-law, right? He was actually confirmed as USDA Undersecretary on August 2nd, 2025, with a vote of 78 to 17. Everybody wanted him. First red flag. but it's a vote his father-in-law, the Senate Majority Leader, presided over and participated in. That is an extraordinary conflict of interest that should be called out. Now, Lindbergh's background is almost entirely in trade promotion and domestic agricultural export advocacy, right? He's not in humanitarian operations, not in conflict zones, not in food security or fragile states, right? He actually founded South Dakota Trade in 2023, and that's actually another NGO assisting South Dakotan exporters. People should look into that. And previously, he served as chief of staff at the XM Bank, the Export-Import Bank, where he helped implement China and transformational export program, which was actually a success. Now, his most notable, well, not really, actually. It was a success, but no, it wasn't. It was more of a success for China, but I digress. But his most notable assignment that he's had was leading the delegation of 39 U.S. agribusinesses to Taiwan to promote American agricultural products. Now, I have to say that somebody else actually led the charge. So it's kind of that ego thing that I'm struggling with. Like, why is somebody else getting credit for his work? But okay, I'll leave it at that. But that is what he has worked on. He's never worked in a conflict zone, never managed humanitarian operations, and this is what the role is. He has no Sudan experience, no African Horn experience, no nothing of that experience, no African experience at any depth whatsoever, no relationships with the UN system, donor governments, civil societies, and the World Food Program depends on all of these things for last mile delivery, especially in places like Darfur. So, past American nominees usually emerge from the same political reward system, like I said, but they're all understood under the imperative of putting the institution ahead of national politics, right? But the question the humanitarian community is already asking out loud is whether Lindbergh would run World Food Program as a genuine humanitarian institution or as an extension of America First agricultural trade policy. Now, see, his expertise would actually kick in future-wise if we actually build a relationship with Sudan. You can't throw him in there and start with fucking trade if you aren't doing the job of the World Food Program. You see where I'm going with it? So I understand why they would look at him, but more so it's the Thune thing, and I'll get to that. But basically, what everyone is concerned is that he's going to be going in to run the world's largest food aid organization into a vehicle for moving U.S. commodity surpluses abroad. Now, we can do that, but the World Food Program can't really be used for that. But it can be used as a segue to build relationships to do that. He is not a person that we want for relationships. He's not capable of doing it. He can learn to do it, and he's a pretty fast learner. No shade, right? He's a fast learner. He's young. He can get there. But he's not where we need him to be with the expertise and the know-how. I mean, we can't have other people fucking nannying him across. We need someone that's got cojones that could go in there and been there, done that, got the t-shirt, let's fix this. And that would understand what to do. And so this is a concern that's not unfair given his background, right? His entire career is about opening markets for American farmers. Here we have the farming center of the world that can feed all of Africa. So you going in there is not going to help because they're not buying your food, buddy, unless you want to keep them in poverty and give them American food. You see where I'm going with this? All right. So why Thune is my problem? Well, President Trump holds all the cards because he appoints them. He can dangle restored financing should a loyalist take the helm, or threaten to gut support if his candidate is blocked. But he hasn't done that because Cruz blocked all of Trump's candidates for the FAA and got away with it. Now he's like making cringy social media posts because he thinks he's going to get SCOTUS. Now, what this dynamic tells us is that Thune pushing his son-in-law is not just nepotism. It is Thune using his position as Senate Majority Leader to deliver a major international appointment to his family while controlling the Senate votes that fund the World Food Program. That's a three-way conflict of interest: family relationship, Senate confirmation authority, and budget appropriation. And the power all in one person's hands. Now, that is actually a vulnerability in Lindbergh even running as a candidate. Like, he shouldn't even be considered, because that's the biggest problem. We can't have this happening. And the argument isn't personal, aside from the fact that I don't like him, but it's institutional. The World Food Program, at this particular moment, facing the world's worst hunger crises in places like Sudan, a funding crisis from U.S. aid cuts, U.S. aid, and the credibility crisis over Gaza, because they fucked up Gaza. We actually need a leader that's primary qualification is the job itself, not their proximity to the Senate majority leader. And that's why in part 2 of my article, I actually looked at the people that we have and who might be the most viable candidate. So I suggest you read it, because that is my grave concern. Like, we need to be doing things correctly, and we keep doing it, in the same process that has been done for over a century. And we need to stop doing that. We can't just be giving out, concession appointments, like people that were not going to get any job, like admirals, generals, and other politicians. They were just given like cushy positions because they didn't qualify or were not wanted for other jobs. And this was a way to save face. Like Cindy McCain getting fired. She steps down, but she's going to get some stupid fucking title sitting somewhere in Arizona doing something. Okay? Because that's the way politics work. And I'm trying to express that to you. So all of you should actually write to the president and say, don't you dare let Thune bully you and tell you that you need to take a son-in-law. We don't need to start selling American food to people that don't have to eat. We need to help them make food, right? Become powerful, become partners with us, which will give us the ability to have a good, solid presence in Africa at the what hurts populations the most, food. Because whoever controls the food, right, controls the people. And we don't want people controlled. And we want to make sure that's safe. And that when Africa comes to the forefront and people are finally going in there, it's done right. Because humanity first, right? And that's how it should be. So on that note, guys, I'm going to bounce. Oh, shit. I'm going to bounce. I've been writing all day and reading all day and Zooming all day. Oh, the Zoom calls. Because I wanted to get into the fact that a lot of you out there, and this is just a tidbit, a lot of you out there think Proton Mail is safe. But let me give you a little tidbit on a story that I'll write as I travel. Proton Mail actually provides your payment information to the FBI upon request. I know this because one of the groups that does all these subversive things panicked because one of the affinity groups was just told by Proton Mail that they had to release their payment methods, meaning like, how you sign up for stuff? You sign up for like email clients and you pay a fee, or if you pay for Proton Mail and not have the free one, well, they can get your details pretty much. So yeah, that's a story that's coming. And for a lot of you people that did those little crypto scams on the right, that's going to be a problem. I mean, why use Proton Mail if there's Google CAPTCHA? And it's housed in Switzerland. But I'll put that all out there for you guys to see. I have it in draft. It's just that this took precedent for me. Now, I just can't believe that I'm turning 48. And I'm going to watch The Wizard of Oz on my birthday. So I'm actually excited about that. I'll take pictures and share on social media when I can. But I'm really excited that I'm going to see The Wizard of Oz. My birthday celebration kind of started with a lot of work. And as you could see, the State Department put out what I've already told a lot of you people, that if you travel overseas, please give them the details of your trip. Just register. It's free. That way you can get text messages as shit goes down. They know where you are and they can take you out of there. Because when we're in situations like this, when there's rumors of wars and actual wars, but if you guys look at Pompeo and where he went, where we gave weapons, you'll understand where the wars are going to happen more. Yeah, they can find you. So, yeah, I'll post pictures. And The Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite stories. I mean, it is also a CIA program. You should read up on that, but Oz, right? But it also shows how the world is run too. Think about it. There's a faceless guy behind a curtain, and all he is some loser pulling levers. Right? Like, think about it. This is why I like The Wizard of Oz. It actually depicts our reality. So, can't reverse my age because it's 84 and not 48. So I got to do something crafty when I do candles, because, you know, it's going to be, I don't know what kind of candles I'm going to blow out. I don't know. We'll see. But happy birthday to all those out there. I know Scotty Martin, the late Scotty Martin, Shailene Martin, her birthday is on March 10th. March 10th is Scotty Martin Day. So I will see if we can attempt to recast the Scotty Martin tribute. It's International Women's Day on the 8th. So for all you men out there, get your wife a rose. Tell her how you appreciate what a hot woman she is. And for all you young men out there, older men, courting women, when you're in the presence of a woman, make her feel like a fragile flower. Make her feel like an actual woman. Because then things get a lot better and easier for everyone. So, yep. I'm turning the big 4-8. I'll see y'all. And let's see. I'm going to leave you with something inspirational and something that we should all remember. That at the end of the day, the only thing that we should trust is God. And you don't have to ask him to come help you. He's just waiting for you to go to him. Remember that always and forever. Have a great night. I can't wait to join you guys back on live. God bless.
Those who spread and cheer, a chasm among their brethren dear. Can you not see the beam in thine own eye before casting judgment from on high? In God we trust, let this be our creed. To build bridges, not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. Instead of seeking peace, you summon strife. You revel in chaos, you crave the fight. But there is but one race, the human race. And in unity's light lies our true might. In God we trust, let this be our creed. To build bridges, not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see. Let us lay down our arms, our words of war, and seek the path of peace once more. For every soul a brother, a sister. In the grand tapestry of life, we are all but one. You serve the schemes of those who profit from discord, from turmoil, from endless pain. But united we stand, divided we fall. In unity we shatter the chain. In God we trust, let this be our creed. To build bridges, not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see. Guardian angels watch from above, guiding us with the wings of love. They whisper peace into our hearts and show us how to mend the parts. In God we trust, let this be our creed. To build bridges, not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of a world torn by needless feuds. For in the light of love's embrace, we find our true and sacred place. Together let us heal the wounds of a world torn by needless feuds. For in the light of love's embrace, we find our true and sacred place. In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges of